Hey guys, Tyler here for MotionArray.com, and in this After Effects tutorial I want to show you how to create this camera lens animation that looks a lot like an ESPN video that I saw and used for reference. So anyway, this is all created inside of After Effects other than this kind of texture here. So let's go ahead and look at how to do this. All right, so the first thing I want to do is create the lens element for the camera. So I'm going to create a new composition. I'm going to come up to composition, new composition, and I'm going to make it 1080 by 1080. So it's a perfect square. Now I'm going to create a new solid. I will just make it white for now. And I'm going to apply a fractal noise. So I'm going to come up to Effect, Noise, and Fractal Noise. And the next thing I'm going to do is just come down to Transform, uncheck Uniform Scaling, and I'm going to scale the width really high to about 10,000, so about as high as it'll go. And now I'm going to decrease the brightness, increase the contrast, and that's looking pretty good. So next I want to apply a radial blur. So I'm going to come up to Effect, come down to Blur and Radial Blur. And I'm going to change this from scratch to rotate. And I'm going to increase the amount a lot. So, you know, it's starting to look like that. Make our quality pretty good, like so. And now I'm going to come up and adjust my fractal noise a bit. I'm going to bring up my contrast more, bring down my brightness, and I'm going to mess with the transform a little bit as well. I'm going to decrease the height so I start to get more ridges in here. All right, so this is starting to look pretty good. You're just gonna have to play around with it until you get what you want. All right, so the next thing I want to do is add some color on top of this. So I'm going to create a new adjustment layer, and I'm going to apply a 4-color gradient. And I can't remember where that is, so I'm just going to search over here for 4-color gradients, and I'm going to apply that to my adjustment layer and change this to, let's see what an overlay looks like. All right, that looks pretty good. And I don't like these colors, so I'm going to just make it more kind of green and blue. Don't like that bright green there. So something like this, a little less saturated on this color, and I want to blend them a little bit more. All right, so there we go. We now have the base of our camera lens element. All right, so now I'm going to start building my camera lens. And this is kind of an organic process, so bear with me as I wing this. So I have an HD composition here, and I'm just going to drag my lens element in, and it looks like this. Not very pretty. So I'm going to highlight it and come up to a circular mask tool, and I'm just going to double click that, and it's going to apply the mask to this layer. And then I'm going to come down here and duplicate the mask and change this one to subtract. And I'm going to double tap MM on the keyboard to bring up all of the mask properties. And under expansion on the second mask, I'm going to decrease that. So now we can start seeing, you know, parts of this lens element. Then I'm going to feather it up a bit. And I only want a little section of this. I don't want the whole ring. So what I'm going to do is come up to Effect, Transition, and come down to Radial Wipe. And I'm going to increase the transition completion to where I like it, and I'm going to increase the feather a bit. So I think this is looking too thick right now, so I'm actually going to decrease the lens expansion, or the mask expansion on the first mask. And I'm kind of starting to like this. It might be a little too wide. All right, so let's go ahead and go with some of this blue down here. That looks pretty good. All right, so I'm going to turn this into a 3D layer by clicking the box. And what I'm going to do now is just continue this process by, duplicating, rotating, and pushing these back in Z space a little bit. And if I want to start grabbing different parts of the lens elements, what I'm going to do is just change the expansion. So we can grab, something like that, and we can decrease the feather if we want, and even decrease the transition completion, so that now, we're starting to get kind of a smaller, hotter looking area. So I'm just going to keep doing this until, it starts to look more like a lens. All right, so the next thing I want to do is add a camera into this composition so that I can see what is going on. So I'm going to come up to Layer, New Camera, and 50mm is fine. And I'm going to add a null object as well to control the camera. So I'm going to come up to Layer, New, Null Object. I'm going to make it 3D, and I'm just going to attach my camera to this null. And now when we change the Z position, you can see that we can kind of fly through the camera lens. All right, so the next thing I want to do is to start adding some of the grunge elements and this flare element as well, and refining the camera lens a little bit. So the first thing I want to do is add a new solid. So Layer, New Solid, call this Flare, click OK. And I'm just going to apply the Video Copilot Optical Flares plugin. And I want this to kind of be a simple flare, so let's see if I can find one. I think I used this one and just changed it to a blue color. That looks pretty good there. Click OK. And it's a little large, so I'm going to scale it down and change it to additive. All right, so that's looking pretty good, but the problem is that our flare is not in Z space. So I'm going to add a new light, a point light, 100%, that's good. And on my flare, I'm going to change its source to track lights. So now it's tracking this light here. And I actually need to push this light back in Z space a bit, and I'm just going to move it kind of right over there. But as I add this light, it's affecting all of my other 3D layers. So I'm going to highlight all of them and click AA. And I'm going to make it where they do not accept lights, like so. And I also want to just highlight all of these lens element layers and make sure that the shy layer button is clicked, and I'm going to shy those so that I no longer have to see them. So now I'm going to add in this kind of dirty, grungy looking texture, and I'm going to change its blending mode to screen. And I actually want to scale this down and make it look like my lens has this grunge on it. So I'm going to get a circular mask and draw it out, feather it a little bit, And I'm gonna push this back in Z space. And I actually need to make sure that it does not accept lights either. Scale it up some. And that looks pretty good right there. I also want to add some more grunge to the outside, so I'm just going to drag, actually I won't drag, I'm just going to duplicate this layer and pull it back in Z space. Delete this mask, scale it up a bit, and rotate it 180 degrees so that it's different from the one that we just added. I'm going to take its transparency down a little bit. All right, so we're looking pretty good. Now I just want to add kind of these color overlays to the sides that you see here. And the way I'd like to do that is by adding just a solid black layer. And coming down to generate and circle. I'm just going to change this to like a pink color. Pull it over to the side. Go to the feather and feather it out a pretty good bit. And change the blending mode to screen. Now I'm going to duplicate this, change this one to more of a green color, and pull it over to the other side. Except maybe I'll make it a little more blue and a little more saturated. All right, so we're looking pretty good now, and we should probably go ahead and start adding in some of these graphical elements. So the first thing I want to do is add in a new white solid to make those lines. I'm going to make it 3D, tap AA, make it where it does not accept lights. I'm going to change this to about 0.5 and scale it out to about 380. Next, I'm going to drag a rectangular mask across the middle, and I'm going to invert that. And I'm just going to add a blur to it. Just a fast blur, set this to horizontal and increase that a bit so that we don't have hard edges. And I'm going to bring the overall opacity of it down and set its blending mode to screen. Next, I'm going to duplicate this and rotate it to about -90. I'm going to bring up my mask expansion and bring that in a bit so you can see it some more. So that's looking pretty good there. Let's go ahead and add in these random numbers. So I'm going to create a new composition. 1920 by 500 is good. I'll just go ahead and name this numbers. And bring up my text tool, type in some random numbers. Maybe that's too many there. And then I'm going to come down to animate, and it's actually off the screen, but I'm going to choose character offset. And now when I animate this, it's just going to cycle through kind of random numbers. So I'll just set a keyframe at the beginning and at the end. And so now we have some cycling numbers. Now back in my main comp, I'm just going to drag my numbers layer in, make it 3D, tap AA, make it where it does not accept lights. I'm going to scale it down. I think I originally had it somewhere over here. Scale it down some more so that it is not too much in your face. And I'm going to take its opacity down some too. I'm just going to duplicate it, pull it over to this other side. Maybe change the opacity a little bit over here. Duplicate it again. Drag it down while holding Shift. I'm just going to mask off kind of the first part of this and feather it horizontally a bit. Something like that. All right. I'm going to actually duplicate that again, drag it down some, and maybe mask off a little bit more. And now this one over here is feeling a little lonely. So I'm going to duplicate it, hold Shift, drag it up some, and mask off some of the back of this. and feather it horizontally as well. All right, so I'm actually going to shy all of these number layers and these solid layers as well, so they can kind of get out of my way. And I'm gonna add in my logo now. So I'm just gonna pull in the logo underneath our color overlays, make it a 3D layer, tap AA, and make it where it does not accept lights. I'm actually gonna push it back in Z space a bit. And if you notice on the original, it had this kind of fall off to it. Kind of had a fall off on the edges. And the way that I did that was by applying the ramp effect and making it radial, switching these to be white and black. Just gonna drag the white into the center and leave black on the outside, and then change its blending mode to screen. So now we get kind of this nice fall off look to it. All right, so now I want to add some animation to the composition. So I'm going to highlight the null that controls the camera and press P to bring up its position. And I'm going to come to about 2 seconds and set a keyframe and come back to the beginning. And I'm actually going to just zoom in past everything to about there. So now we have this kind of zooming out action going. And then at about 5 seconds, I'm going to set another keyframe. And at, about 7, I'm going to zoom back. So now we're zooming out, holding, and zooming back in. Now I think I would like to continue to zoom out ever so slightly. So I'm going to come back to the second keyframe and push in just a little bit. Now I'm going to make this an ease in keyframe and make this an ease out keyframe. And if I bring up my graph editor, I'm going to highlight this first keyframe and kind of pull it out to make it smoothly ease in. And then I'm going to bring this one up and pull it out as well so that we smoothly ease back in. But as you can see, we have a little bit of some Bezier interpolation going on. So let me change that from auto Bezier to linear. And it should be fixed. There we go. We're looking pretty good. But let's go ahead and much highlight everything and turn motion blur on, and turn motion blur on for the composition. And I'm gonna turn that back off. As we're pulling through the camera lens, I want this logo to land. So I'm gonna set a position keyframe about at 215, make it an ease in, and then somewhere around 1 second, we're just going to pull this logo back past the camera. Like so. Then I'm going to set a keyframe for the opacity, and as it flies past the camera so that it's not abruptly coming in. So let's see. Should be flying in pretty nicely. Yeah. Like so. Pretty good, pretty good. So if we look back at the original, this one looks more vibrant, and that was because I just did a little bit of color correction. So I'm going to make a new adjustment layer, and I'm going to apply a curves adjustment, and let's see, I'm just gonna increase the contrast a little bit, ever so slightly, and I'm gonna come down to my blue channel and add some blue the darks. And also on this layer, I'm going to add some noise. So I'm going to come into noise, and I'm going to come into HLS noise actually. And under lightness, I'm just going to change it to about 4. That might be too much. Let's change it to 3. There we go. It's looking pretty good. let's go ahead and do a RAM preview and see what we have going on. All right, so this is looking pretty good. There are a few things I want to change with it. I would like for the logo to fly in faster. And also, if you notice closely, you can see some anti-aliasing going on with the logo. So in order to fix that, I'm just going to add a fast blur. And I'm going to blur it as it comes in. So right about here, let's say, take it up to about 6. Set a keyframe, jump forward about 10 frames and drop it down to 0. So now when it flies past, you're not going to notice the anti-aliasing. But I also wanted to, speed it up. So let's do that. And something else I noticed going on was that when the camera pulled back, it didn't keep traveling as much as I wanted it to. So I'm going to come to this third keyframe and pull it back even further. But after doing this, I want to go back in and check out my graph editor and make sure that these are all aligned nicely so that we don't get some weird hiccups in the animation. So now I think we have a pretty good animation. Now, if you wanted to, I think on the original I took some of these brighter lens elements and just added a slow rotation to them. So you can add that in. And yeah, so that is about it. Let's go ahead and take another look at our RAM preview. All right, so there we go. It's looking pretty good. I'll probably would want to fix the zoom in, make it happen a little faster, and also blur out the logo as it's coming towards the camera so that we don't see that aliasing going on. So anyway, that's about it for this tutorial. Sorry it was so all over the place, but this is a longer tutorial than I'm used to, and hopefully I get better at it in the future. So thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it. Bye.